The lights of Atlanta's Georgia Dome blazed down upon Muhammad Ali's trembling hands as he gripped the Olympic torch on July 19, 1996. Millions watched worldwide, unaware of the battle raging inside the man once known as the greatest. Parkinson's disease had stolen his fluid movements, transformed his resonant voice into a whisper, and left his once expressive face a stoic mask. Yet something burned in his eyes that transcended his physical limitations, a determination that had defined his entire life. 3 decades earlier, standing in a packed auditorium at Howard University, a younger Ali had faced another kind of trembling. Not from disease, but from anger at an audience that began to snicker when he stumbled over words during an impassioned speech about refusing military service. "I may not articulate like the college graduates," he had said, his voice rising above the scattered laughter, "but my mind can think as deep, my heart can feel as deep." If this story has already made you feel something, no matter how small, don't leave without giving back. Comment and tell me where you're watching this video from, and subscribe to the channel. The journey between these two moments, from the ridicule of intellectuals to silencing the world with his Olympic appearance, reveals more than a boxing legend's biography. It tells the story of a man who transformed limitation into strength and turned mockery into reverence. Before Ali became the trembling torchbearer who moved a planet to tears, he had weathered storms of public hatred, government persecution, and the sacrifice of his prime athletic years for his principles. Dr. James Winchester, a linguistics professor who attended the Howard speech in 1967, recalled the transformation of the audience. "They came expecting entertainment from a boxer playing at being intellectual," he said years later. "They left haunted by the realization that eloquence isn't measured by your vocabulary, but by how deeply your words reach into the human spirit." Ali's journey with language began in Louisville, Kentucky, where Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr. struggled with dyslexia in school, earning him the label dumb from teachers who mistook his learning difference for lack of intelligence. Reading difficulties pushed young Cassius toward physical expression, his fists becoming the vocabulary his mouth couldn't master. Yet even then, something in him understood that true greatness required both physical and verbal power. His grandfather, a former slave, had whispered stories of resistance into his ears, tales of men and women who used every tool available to fight oppression, including their voices. These stories planted seeds that would later bloom into the courageous stance that cost Ali his heavyweight title, but earned him his greater legacy. The rain pounded against the windows of Chicago's International Amphitheater on February 25, 1964, matching the intensity inside as 22-year-old Cassius Clay prepared to face the seemingly invincible Sonny Liston. Boxing analysts had already written their stories of Clay's inevitable defeat. Betting odds stood 7-1 against him. But in hotel rooms and press conferences leading up to the fight, Clay deployed a weapon as powerful as his legendary footwork. His voice, "Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee," he proclaimed, the phrase becoming more than pre-fight hype. It was poetry that transformed boxing from brutality to art. When he stunned the world by defeating Liston, Clay shouted to reporters, "I shook up the world. I'm the greatest thing that ever lived." Howard Cosell, the legendary sportscaster who developed a complex relationship with Ali over decades, recognized something others missed. "Behind those boasts," Cosell later wrote, "was a young man using language to reinvent himself, to become the person he needed to be to survive in a world determined to destroy him." The day after becoming heavyweight champion, Clay announced his membership in the Nation of Islam and his new name, Muhammad Ali. White America's reaction was swift and vicious. Columnists refused to use his new name. Former supporters abandoned him. Hate mail flooded his home. In boxing rings, he was introduced as Cassius Clay, while the announcer emphasized, also known as Muhammad Ali, with undisguised contempt. Through it all, Ali insisted on defining himself. "I know where I'm going, and I know the truth, and I don't have to be what you want me to be," he said, words that resonated with the civil rights movement rising around him. Martin Luther King Jr., initially critical of Ali's religious conversion, later said, "He is giving boxing the dignity of a forum for expressing the hope of minority peoples." When Ali refused military induction in 1967, declaring, "I ain't got no quarrel with them Viet Cong," the establishment stripped him of his title and boxing license. For 3.5 years, his athletic prime, Ali couldn't earn a living in his profession. Instead, he traveled to colleges, speaking about racial justice and opposition to the Vietnam War. It was during these speeches that Ali confronted academic audiences who sometimes mocked his grammar or pronunciation. At Cornell University, a student asked if his speeches were prepared for him. Ali responded with characteristic quickness. "Do they tell the birds how to sing? Do they tell the oceanic waves how to lap against the shore? My words come from my heart, not from someone else's brain." Madison Square Garden, 1971. The fight of the century between Ali and Joe Frazier represented more than boxing. It symbolized America's cultural and political divisions. Ali had become a voice for black pride and anti-war sentiment. Frazier was portrayed unfairly as the establishment's champion. The 15 brutal rounds ended with Ali's first professional defeat, but something more significant happened between rounds. Ferdy Pacheco, Ali's longtime doctor, noticed a change in Ali's speech pattern, slight hesitations, occasional slurring. "We didn't know then what we know now about repeated head trauma," Pacheco later confessed. Hadisha, those pauses between his words would grow longer over the years until they became the most eloquent part of his communication. By the Thriller in Manila in 1975, Ali's third and most punishing fight with Frazier, his verbal cadence had slowed noticeably. After winning what he called the closest thing to death, Ali began showing early signs of the neurological damage that would eventually silence his famous voice. Thomas Hauser, Ali's biographer, noted the cruel irony. The man who changed how athletes use their voice was slowly losing his. Yet somehow, as his words became fewer, each one carried more weight. In 1984, 3 years after his final fight, Ali was diagnosed with Parkinson's syndrome. The diagnosis transformed the narrative around his speech difficulties. What critics had once mocked as Ali's foolishness or attributed to lack of education was revealed as the early onset of a progressive neurological condition. Some neurologists suggested that Ali's verbal creativity, his rhymes, his quick responses, his linguistic playfulness, might have been his brain's way of compensating for emerging damage. Angelo Dundee, Ali's trainer throughout his career, observed this transformation with heartbreaking clarity. In the beginning, reporters would count how many words Ali spoke in a minute. It was that many. By the end, they counted how many minutes between his words. But either way, people listened. By 1990, Ali's public appearances had become rare. Each word required immense effort, yet his eyes remained expressive, communicating what his voice no longer could. Bryant Gumbel, interviewing Ali for NBC, found himself moved to tears when Ali whispered, "My mind still works." The simple statement carried the weight of a poem. Dr. Abraham Lieberman, Ali's neurologist, explained, "What most people don't understand about Parkinson's is that it doesn't affect intelligence or emotional comprehension. Muhammad understood everything happening around him. He just couldn't respond the way he once did." The decision to have Muhammad Ali light the Olympic cauldron at the 1996 Atlanta Games was controversial. Olympic organizers debated whether showcasing Ali's physical deterioration might overshadow the celebration. Janet Evans, the swimmer who passed the torch to Ali, later revealed that some officials worried, what if he drops it? What if he can't complete the task? Ali's wife Lonnie advocated fiercely for her husband. Let Muhammad be seen, she insisted. His struggle is part of his strength. On that summer night, as Ali emerged from the shadows, torch in hand, a collective gasp swept through the stadium, followed by a roar that seemed to shake the foundations of the Georgia Dome. 85,000 people in attendance and 3.5 billion watching worldwide witnessed something transcendent. A man whose body betrayed him, yet whose spirit remained unconquerable. Dick Ebersol, then president of NBC Sports, recalled, "We had technical directors, camera operators, hardened TV professionals with tears streaming down their faces. Nobody spoke in our production booth. There was nothing to say." Ali's hands shook violently as he struggled to light the cauldron. The flame flickered, caught, then blazed upward. In that moment, every tremor of his body seemed to speak volumes his voice no longer could. About courage, about dignity, about the price paid for standing by one's convictions. Bob Costas, broadcasting the moment live, fell silent for 45 seconds, an eternity in television time, before simply saying, "That's Muhammad Ali." Those 3 words acknowledged that no further explanation was necessary. The world that had once laughed at Ali's distinctive speech patterns, that had mocked his name change, that had vilified his political stands, now watched in reverent silence as he completed his improbable journey from pariah to global icon. Without speaking a single word, Ali had delivered his most powerful message. In the years that followed, until his death in 2016, Ali communicated mostly through gesture, expression, and presence. The man who had once filled rooms with cascades of words found new eloquence in silence. His daughter Hannah wrote, "People think Parkinson's was his greatest fight. It wasn't. His greatest fight was against hatred and fear, and he won that long before his hands began to shake." When Ali did speak publicly in his final years, it was often a single sentence of profound simplicity. At a humanitarian award ceremony in 2012, helped to the microphone, Ali whispered just 7 words. "I've made my share of mistakes too." The audience rose in a standing ovation that lasted 7 minutes. Those who had laughed at his speech decades earlier, the professors, the journalists, the politicians, now understood what Ali had always known. True communication transcends perfect grammar or fluid delivery. The power of words comes not from how they are spoken, but from the truth they contain and the courage required to speak them. In his final public statement, too frail to speak, Ali had an assistant read, "I am and always will be a man of few words. Count them carefully. They matter more than my punches ever did. If you've made it this far and felt every word, don't leave without subscribing." I tell these stories with my heart in my hand to reach people like you, who feel, who get emotional, who live. If this truly touched you, give back, comment, subscribe. Come be part of this family with me until the next video.